to the club. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, guys, we are live and well, whatever. We'll see. We'll see. But hey, I want to introduce.
We are live
and I have an endless loop here. But anyway, hey, Bob Dunn and welcome Bob and Greg Moody and Stephen Oliver. And this is a fraction of our team at Financial Advisor Wealth Mastery. And we wanted to, we're going to kind of make this one short and sweet today, but we just got done with a big client meeting. What do we have, Greg? 61 day, yep. 15 another day, 12 another day, something like that. And one of the topics we talked about, and by the way, from the standpoint of anybody who's gone through all 60 or 100 or whatever, how many videos and podcasts we have so far, this sounds a little opposite of what we normally talk about, right? We normally talk about one of the ways to effectively grow your practice is to be the expert in a tiny niche. In other words, be the guy for neurosurgeon, or be the gal for plastic surgeons, or be the person for Porsche aficionados, or anything like that. And this is going to go a little different direction. And by the way, just as a kickoff here, we are doing this and a whole series of new podcasts to kick off the book that is finally 90 days past our release date, right. More or less. What was it? March, April? I lose track.
A few months past our release date.
Pre-summer, now is post-summer, but you know that it is what it is. Extraordinary Marketing for Financial Advisors is ready to roll. And Miss Dr. Moody, you had a great hand in developing this, and Bob, we mostly kept you shielded from the process. So grateful for.
That's why it came out so good.
That's not what I was implying. I was just implying the train still had to run while behind the scenes the mice were scurrying and the ducks were furiously underwater accomplishing things. At a pace hereunto unknown, of slowness. And of course we had everything from COVID to deaths in families to a multitude of other things that got in the way, and as is life. But anyway, our topic that we were talking to with our clients, in fact it was I forget if this one was at the beautiful Table Mountain Inn in Golden, Colorado, or if this was here at my house. I think it was at the when we had them at the hotel. But we were talking about making use of every resource that you have, and terminology that I stole, but I was doing this way before I ever heard this, is Chet Holmes, the late great Chet Holmes. He was a great sales trainer, but he used the term create your dream 100 list. And maybe he got that from somebody else. I don't know. Usually it goes back to Ben Franklin or Earl Nightingale or somebody. But the idea of the dream 100 list is, if you were to sit down and think of in your community, and again, this is a little bit of a counterpoint, because we spend very little, or a great deal of time, maybe I should say, disabusing people of the fact that they have to be a financial advisor in a 3-mile radius, and suggesting instead that, depending upon your licensing capabilities and so forth, that you might as well, hit throughout the US, hit throughout North America, if you're in Europe, through, as broad a radius as it is possible for you, rather than be tightly geographically targeted. And one of the things that shocks me is that financial advisors somehow think that proximity to their office, that people should choose an advisor based on zip code rather than based upon needs, preferences, and frankly, your ability to go get them. But the starting point of this is, and excuse me, I'm a little hoarse from yelling over one of our colleagues, right. I think was, he denies that that's the challenge, but it certainly was the challenge.
I was there.
Yes, I have witnesses, and I have it on video too. Yeah. But anyway, the Dream 100 idea is, if you were to sit down and make your Dream 100, who you would think, as you put some analysis into it, would be the most valuable possible clients for you, and specifically make a list of 50 or 100 or 200, doesn't have to be 100, but specifically make a target of those people in your community, in your niche, in your area that would be the most valuable for you. And then among everything else of creating new flow of prospective clients, you specifically went after those people at 10 times the level of effort and intensity that you're doing otherwise. And I'm going to give you an example with my own business, or a whole bunch of examples. But over the years, I ended up, and some of this was because I intended it and went after them. And some of this was frankly, just because we, and again, I had a big staff at this time. I had 50 or so people here in the Denver metro area working underneath me, but I taught them to at least listen well and communicate well. But I had a couple of marquee players from the Denver Broncos. I had a couple of former marquee players from the Denver Broncos. I had obviously of our pro football team, for those of you who are clueless as I am about football. But we also had the chief financial officer at the time for the Broncos. We also had the marketing director for the Denver Nuggets, our professional basketball team. I also ended up having the HR director for the largest employer in the state at the time, which was US West, which evolved into a couple of iterations, is now CenturyLink, is no longer headquartered in Denver, but they were the biggest, as a baby bell at the time, they were the biggest employer in the state of Colorado. I also had several executives with Coors Brewing Company, again, one of the top employers in the state. I had the CEO of Norwest Banks, which got converted into Wells Fargo. Here I had the regional director of, I think it was a 5-state region for the McDonald's Corporation. I had the owner of the Paul Mitchell distributorship in a 2 or 3 state area here. And I could go on and on and on, but I ended up with, I had the president, chief operating officer, and the sales manager for a $780 million electronics chain. And, who was, it was Ultimate Electronics, but it was a comparable of Best Buy or, what are the other ones that got Amazoned out of existence? But you get the
Circuit City.
Yeah, it was an upscale comparable of Circuit City, high-end audio, as in early flat screens, TVs, and so forth. But I could go on and on that list. Pro athletes, executives in athletic, in the back office for those organizations. People who are in C-suite level positions among big employers. I think one was 45,000 employees just in the metro area, or may have been in the state, I forget, but at one time. And you can go on and on and on. And so you start creating that Dream 100. And I think back, what one of my favorite shows is, Greg, Bob, have you seen the movie, the TV show Ballers? With
yeah,
The Rock?
Of course.
Yeah. Well, the whole premise of The Rock, of Ballers, is that he's a former pro football player and he's now a financial advisor, aka wealth manager, for pro football players and other pro athletes, using his position as a former marquee, I forget what he was, quarterback or whatever the heck position he is. You're the football fan.
Defensive player.
There you go. Former defensive player, like Carl Mecklenburg. So he was like Carl Mecklenburg, my friend and former Bronco. Okay, now I can relate it to a human being. So, but the whole premise of that show is he's using his end as one of them to create this, this affinity with marquee athletes. In other words, with the ones who aren't getting paid, union scale and are hitting the average of 2 years and out, which is the average tenure of a pro football player, but hitting the marquee players and then managing their funds. But it's an entertaining show, and a lot of it is unrealistic. But the part that is realistic is using that kind of affinity, using that kind of foot in the door to expand among a target base of people. So what we're talking about with the Dream 100 list is finding either niches that you want to dominate, and who are opinion leaders within those niches that if you had them as clients, it would lead to a lot of other good things, or who in your geographic area is tied to organizations where they either influence a lot of people within their organization that would be great prospective clients. In other words, doing the retirement planning for all of the executive staff of a company with 45,000 employees, like a former Baby Bell, as an example. We were working with somebody else who was doing that with Vonage and a couple of other similar companies. But who in your area, if you drew a hierarchy of who some of the biggest finds would be as clients, and who once they became clients would be excellent conduits for expanding your business, would be a target. Greg, Bob, what would you add to that?
Well, and one thing I think for people listening, they may be thinking, well, Steve can do that. Steve had all these people in his circle of influence that were, these famous people and owners of these big companies and all that. But at one point you didn't. No. And so I think you want to hear this not in the current state, but of how it was at the beginning. You didn't know these people and you went out to meet these people. And it's really easier than you think if you create the Dream 100 list and then you start finding ways to approach them and talk to them. It's not as hard as you think. Now, if you have the Dream 100 list and you just, walked up to each of them, walked up to their office, are you going to get all of them to welcome you with open arms and go, hey, that's great. How can I invest with you? How can I give you all my money? No, of course not. That's not how it's going to be. And you'll have some rejection along the way, but that's how it works. You would have had some of that along the way, but out of that 100, you can, what if 10 of those ended up doing something with you? And that's a very powerful 10. And then the next round through it, maybe a few more of them. And the next round through it, maybe a few more of them. And each of those are very powerful people to deal with. A lot more powerful than what we end up talking to a lot of advisors is that they go to their own accountant. Their own accountant that might have a whole bunch of clients that maybe only 5% of them are really in the target market that they want to work with.
Well, one step above H&R Block.
Yeah, exactly. And 5% of their 100 clients means like 5 people. Big deal. And their own accountant isn't a very good marketer. Their own accountant's not very good at giving you referrals. That's not going to be powerful.
I hate to generalize, but accountants and lawyers all suck at marketing.
I don't think that's an inaccurate statement. So stereotypes are true for a reason. So they inform us about what's probable. So it doesn't start out, but it doesn't start out that way. So all those things that you just said, one day, when you moved to Denver, you didn't have any of those experiences. You don't have any of those relationships. But the point is you start paying attention. At one point, you start paying attention to, hey, I can have those conversations. So what I hope that everybody's getting from this video is that if you right now you start going, hey, I could pay attention to that, I'm going to start paying attention to who that would be on that list, and then start looking for opportunities to connect with them. And one of the ways to connect with them, and maybe talk about this, is connect with all these people based on what's in it for them, not based on pitching something to them.
No. And that's a huge mistake that people make, right? Is as soon as you meet someone, you're handing them your card and you're trying to pitch your product. And that's the surest way to shut them down. And my approach has always been the opposite. My approach has been to provide so much value. And it's that great book that we recommend. I mean, nobody in sales should ever have, lived without reading Influence, Science, and Practice by Robert Cialdini. But he talks about one of the best sales principles of all is reciprocity. Is the human mind and emotional circuitry is wired for people who are ethical and honest, and there's a 5% exception to that across the human race. But for everybody else, is the more you do for them, the more that they're itching to do something back for you. So and you make the point, Greg. I knew nobody in the metro area. I was young, had zero, literally zero contacts here, and early on didn't really, to tell you the truth, know who some of these people were. I tell you the story about bringing in famous active pro football player who was, back in the Super Bowl Broncos John Elway days. He was like the second marquee player in the organization. He had two or three, and I got him started as a client, and I went back to our staff meetings, and I say, I enrolled some pro football player. His name is Steve. Let's see, what is it? Starts with Watson, and everybody thought I was crazy because other than John Elway at the time, there was him and Carl Mecklenburg and Steve Sewell. There was this small list of which, other than Elway, we ended up with all three of them in one way, shape, or form. But it was knowing enough to target. An example outside of myself is, my friend for many years passed away recently, Bob Wall. He ended up handling all of Chuck Norris's finances and Priscilla Presley's finances and a few other people. And the connection with Priscilla Presley was, of course, Elvis was a martial artist, and they didn't picture this in the movie, but as I understand it, she ran off from Elvis with Mike Stone, who was a famous martial artist back then, and she ended up going from Memphis to L.A. But she was in the circle of these different people who are doing martial artists. So Priscilla's fortune, which was quite a fortune while Elvis was alive, and it was a heck of a fortune after Elvis passed and left it to Priscilla and Lisa Marie to manage. He was managing their money and managing Chuck Norris's money, but it was all about affinity. In this case, the affinity was, they all had ties to martial arts like we do, and it was the natural end. And people will hear things like that and say, what does my love of Porsches, or what is my love of motorcycles, or what is my love of martial arts? Well, anytime you're approaching somebody from a hobby that's an affinity. Another friend of mine was working with not Lee Marvin. Who's the other actor that was in a number of Bruce Lee's?
You're thinking
of James Coburn.
Okay.
But he had built quite an affinity with James Coburn. But they were both Acura NSX fans. So they both ended up at a road, at a road rally, and they both had I think both even the same color, little red Acura NSXs, and they bonded over their affinity for Acura NSX. Well, it really doesn't matter what it is. I have several clients who are into motorcycles, like I am sort of, Jeff is a lot. Well, I mean, we put pictures on their site of them, on their Beamer or on their Harley or on their Goldwing, whatever it might be, and they're doing training and so forth. And all of a sudden, and there's quite an economic disparity or a range of people who are into motorcycles. I mean, Harley got a lot of traction when Malcolm Forbes showed up at Sturgis on his very expensively decked out Harley and a very expensively decked out travel trailer many years ago, if you don't know this story. So there's all kinds of different ways of building that affinity, but the lesson to learn is you start with reciprocity. Well, I guess you start with targeting, and then anytime you're in any level of personal relationship, you start with reciprocity. My relationship with Chuck Norris, really, when it went beyond acquaintance, was because I was helping him, promote his various projects, and sooner or later, it was like, well, what can I do for you? Well, I don't know. Let's think about it. But he's as nice and honest a guy as you're ever going to meet, by the way. But all of those relationships should be starting with what you can do for them, not what they can do for you. It should start with not trying to pitch your service directly, but ways that you can solve problems for them. And perhaps those solving problems are directly related to their challenges. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they have some other issue they're trying to solve, and you just happen to know the right person, or you have the right experience to connect them. But it starts with, what's your dream 100? If you were to build a list of people who could have the most positive impact for you, and sometimes it's the other hand. If you go through your current client base, we have a client, and they had just never dawned on them that they have this great affinity with a bunch of very high level politicians in their state. They have affinity with great number of church leaders and so forth. just had never used those ties effectively and managed to expand beyond that. They thought of that as compartmentalized. Is
Well,
here's my business. I'm recruiting people for my business, and here's my other loves, and I somehow build a Chinese wall between them. That's a dumb thing to do.
yeah, and I think the way you said that, I think they have problems with. They think use that relationship. It's not use it
Right.
in a way that's not positive for them. It genuinely is what's in it for them, and have that conversation. And I think we get so nervous and caught up in anxiety in our mind about, oh, I'm really trying to do this for my business. I'm maybe even in a scarcity mentality that I've got to make money from this conversation. I'm trying to get them to do something for my business. And if you really stop and listen about what's going on with them, what's going on with their life, what's happening, and how you can help, most of the time you find some way that it's positive and beneficial for them, that you can do something for them. But we don't take the time to listen and do a thorough job of finding out what's going on. And in that case, I think very, very clearly, for example, if it's church leaders that you have a conversation with, you think of that as, well, I'm going to donate money. I'm going to go donate and work at their soup kitchen, or I'm going to, go do something that is gonna be taking money out of my pocket or taking time out of my schedule. And instead, though, don't they need an education in how to manage their finances? Don't the people that are the church leaders who happen to maybe have a lot of money, or the people that donate the money into the pot, also need some services and things, and that would be very helpful for them? There's so many ways that this can be positive and beneficial for them. And it doesn't have to be like this, okay, now I'm going to flip it into, me doing a sale, flip it into me doing a pitch. It can be congruent and beneficial. And then it's a long-term valuable relationship with. I hope that makes sense, but it doesn't have to be two different things. It can be one thing that's beneficial for your business too.
Yeah, and don't overthink it. I mean,
I know we got to wrap it up real quick.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I was just going to say, don't overthink it. I mean, so many people, this is great information, and I just hope that everybody listening actually takes action, right? And just build out that rapport with everybody that you're in. And I'm sure most everybody listening is in a niche, whether it's golfing, motorcycles, what have it. And so there's a lot of opportunity there. And
you'd be amazed at how many people are afraid to niche. They think that if I focused on a niche, that means I exclude everybody else. And really nothing can be further from the truth. You're always better to rifle target prospects than you are to scatter shot, the analogy of a sawed-off shotgun versus a sniper rifle. But certainly when it comes down to us focusing on that Dream 100, that's now rifle shotting on influencers, right? And you can think of rifle shotting on influencers being go after people with big podcasts and big audiences, one thing or another. Or you can think of people who are in a high responsibility level, or of organizations, like I mentioned, sports organizations and big employers. Or you can think in terms of targeting newscasters and producers in your local stations. But Greg, we were going to keep this short. I know you've got to run, so we will call it a day. Again, just to announce, the new book is done and will be on shelves soon, so to speak, and we'll be making that available at the website, advisorwealthmastery.com.
Well, thanks everybody. Get to work.
And that digital version is fantastic, by the way. That looks great.
Yeah.